Welcome to the Key Biscayne Independent 2022 Mayoral Debate. My name is Tom Mazloum. I will be acting as your moderator this evening. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors without whom tonight would not be possible. That is the Key Biscayne Community Foundation, the Key Biscayne Chambers of Commerce, and First Service Residential. I do want to point out that what they have done in providing us with resources and sponsorship is awesome, and you guys are blessed to have them on the island. In order to ask questions tonight, we have assembled a panel of extremely experienced journalists. You guys probably know Tony Winton. He's a 30-year veteran of the Associated Press. He is currently the editor-in-chief of the Key Biscayne Independent, which is the newspaper in your community that is putting on this debate. We have Alex Harris. She's the climate reporter for the Miami Herald, and she's covered issues of resiliency as well as education, crime, and breaking news, and she has a host of experience. And Jessica De Leon, who made my life difficult because she texted me her bio. I'm teasing you. Covered crime, courts, and law enforcement for the Bradenton Herald for nearly a decade. She also covered local government, politics, child welfare, COVID, and breaking news. And she's worked at the Herald and Sun Sentinel previously. She's currently the general assignment reporter for the Key Biscayne Independent, so you will be seeing Jessica around town. I would be remiss without pointing to the group all the way in the back at the control panel. That is Theo Miller. He is our director this evening. He is a Mast Academy graduate, and he's the student reporter for KBI. Our timekeeper is going to be bringing the candidates out over here. She is a colleague of mine at my company. Her name is Sydney Vigil. She's a staff member at the M Network, and she will be the most powerful person in this room. And now it comes time to introduce you to your candidates. As I said before, I will ask you to hold your applause except for when they come on stage and when they are finished with the debate. So now would be your time to make noise. They were in the back. We've cast lots for both podium position as well as order. And that order was decided that candidate A is Fausto Gomez, candidate B is Joe Rasco, and candidate C is Katie Petrus. Please welcome them to the stage. Thank you all for coming. All right, well, we are going to start with opening statements from each of the candidates in order. That means 90 seconds for each, starting with candidate Gomez.
Good evening, Key Biscayne. My name is Fausto Gomez, and I want to be your mayor. Let me first recognize on stage my fellow candidates and thank them for joining us here. My wife and Alina and I have enjoyed life in Key Biscayne since 2001, and I am a very proud husband, father, and most importantly, a grandfather. I was born in Cuba and raised in Miami by my mother and grandmother. I'm a graduate of FIU and give back to the community by sponsoring a permanent scholarship in the political sciences. At 18, I began my professional career in the mayor's office of the city of Miami. From there, I was recruited to head the governmental affairs efforts of FIU, helping to make it the university it is today. After FIU, I opened my own government affairs firm and successfully operated for 38 years. During that time, I represented Key Biscayne and brought to this community over $15 million. I'm running because I love Key Biscayne. I am a clear break from the personalities and policies of the past and have the skills to effectively meet the challenges of today. My approach is more seasoned and experienced. It's time to turn the page. The village charter gives a unique role to the mayor to serve as the face of the community. And my career provides a perfect template and network to assure Key Biscayne's needs are met.
Time.
Thank you, Candidate Gomez.
you.
We will now hear opening statements from Candidate Rasco.
Good evening, Key Biscayne. I'm Joe Rasco, and I'm running for mayor because I love this island. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been here for 44 years. I'm married to Anna, my wife of also 44 years. And together, we were able to raise 3 outstanding children here on this island. And today, I'm blessed to have 2 of my 6 grandchildren living here and growing up in Key Biscayne. But I need to tell you that the village is now at a crossroads. We have major challenges ahead. Let's talk about Rickenbacker Causeway, Bear Cut Bridge, sea level rise, and beach renourishment. Solving these issues will be costly, and Key Biscayne deserves a trusted leader to guide us into the future. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Candidate Rasco. Candidate Petros?
Good evening. I would also like to thank the Key Biscayne Independent for hosting this event tonight and giving us the opportunity to reach the residents of the island one more time. As I shared in the last debate, I'm a 30-year resident of Key Biscayne who served on your village council from 2016 to 2020. Professionally, I have worked in the private and public sector and have a strong financial background. This is our first primary in 30 years. It's an opportunity to vote for the candidate you believe is the most qualified person to represent the community, even if you make a different choice in November. Since serving on council, I've established excellent relationships with county, state, and federal stakeholders. Our beach renourishment, climate resiliency, and new construction efforts have been made possible in part by my advocacy at higher levels of government. Indeed, many of our most important relationships are with leaders who, like myself, came into these positions in just the past few years. Mayor Levine Cava and Commissioner Regalado have been universally praised for their time and attention to our community, attention that was sorely missing when our representatives were part of the old guard. As your mayor, I will continue my work to tackle the issues facing our village today with the integrity, humility, and hard work that Key Biscayners deserve from their government. Time.
Thank you, Candidate Petros. It seems appropriate that we will begin tonight with the topic that actually proves to be an existential threat to the island, and that is sea level rise and resilience. Jessica De Leon will read an email question from one of the residents of Key Biscayne. Each of the candidates will have an opportunity to answer that question.
Mast Academy has a goal to become zero net energy and zero waste school. Should that be a goal of the village?
Candidate Gomez.
Of course, but there's a difference between a goal and what can be achieved. Let's take a look at state policy. State policy has a goal to have zero net. Okay? However, even though that is a policy, the implementation of it has been blocked. Now, we are a small community. We're 15,000 people. We have, I believe our village provides some resources to zero waste culture. Now, that is a goal, and I think we should absolutely work towards that goal and hopefully meet that goal. The question is, by when do they want to meet the goal? I'm sorry. Did they give a time?
2030? Correct.
By 2030. Well,
Do you think it should be a goal then, sir, by 2030?
of course, I think it should be a goal, and I think we should meet that goal and do everything possible to meet it.
Candidate Rasco.
Absolutely, yes. Mast Academy should set that goal, and we should be participants in helping them achieve that goal. We have a special relationship with Mast Academy. We've done some excellent things. We have increased our ability to have our students go to Mast. This is something that has been worked on before by prior councils, and it's been very, very successful. Mast Academy is about Key Biscayne, and so we absolutely, under my leadership, would encourage that.
Candidate Petrus?
I also agree it should be a goal of our community. I think it's a difficult goal. I think that I met with some Master Academy students last weekend, and we discussed one in particular, gave a hard charge and did some research in middle school about CO2 emissions with the buses that are out there. And she actually was able to advocate for funding through the Volkswagen settlement to get money for the Dade County schools to replace their buses. Unfortunately, they still haven't replaced them even though they have the money. So these are some of the obstacles that we face in a community. In our community right now, we have some quick and easy solutions that we can start to work on right away. We have responsible residents that have taken initiatives on their own, but as a community, we need to do better with our recycling around public spaces. We need to have another look at plastics. Unfortunately, the state exempts us from banning plastic bags, but I think the time may be right to look at that again. We also have dog waste bags that need to be improved. So yes to the goal, but there's a long way to go, and we need to start immediately on small things and then tackle the big things at the same time.
Thank you. Alex Harris will now have a question for candidate Gomez.
Do you support raising roads to keep Key Biscayne dry? If so, why and how?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure, yes, ma'am. Do you support raising roads to keep Key Biscayne dry? And if so, how? How high? What areas of the village? Where do you see that being most useful?
Well, let's take a look at the recent experience of the City of Miami Beach. City of Miami Beach raised the roads. City of Miami Beach currently is under lawsuit by a significant number of the residents because what they're saying, the residents, is that the road crested and now is flooding their properties. Now, we obviously need to take care of our flooding issues on Key Biscayne. I am committed to that. I'm also committed to undergrounding our power because when we open the streets, basically to take care of our flooding issues, we should underground our power. Now, obviously, we need to take a quick look and a detailed look about raising roads. Is it effective? Is it not effective? Has it worked on Miami Beach? It's worked on Miami Beach in certain areas. It has not worked in other areas. Our roads here on Key Biscayne are fairly narrow. Okay? And so therefore, our infrastructure is completely different than other cities. So my answer to that is if it works, I'm in favor of raising the roads where it works, but there has to be a significant number of analysis. That's not a question you can say yay or nay without having an analysis, looking at our topography, looking at our infrastructure, and looking if it's worked or not worked in other jurisdictions.
This is the process the village has been going through to determine exactly how high the roads would be raised and where, though. Have you been keeping up with that?
I disagree with you. Let me tell you the reason why. What the village did, the village hired ACOM, which is a consultant. ACOM came in with a $250 million tab, 8 zones at $30 million apiece, essentially, for raising roads and for taking care of the water. There has been some dispute, even with the ACOM team and the city, whether raising roads or not raising roads is the most effective area. So, if we're talking about flooding, which is what we're talking about, okay? Raising roads is not the panacea. There's a whole panoply of things that need to happen, whether it's basically putting pumps, because we cannot do gravity any longer. How many pumps are we going to put? Where are the pumps going to be? And frankly, are we going to get sued by, under the Burt Harris Act, because if a pump goes next to a house, then the value of that home reduces, and you can have a Burt Harris Act claim. So there's a whole series of issues. The bottom line is this. Bottom line is I am fully in favor of making sure our flooding issues are taken care of. I am fully in favor of undergrounding our utilities. The question you asked me needs a lot more examination than, frankly, 30 seconds on a stage.
Thank you. Now Tony Winton will have a question for candidate Rasco.
Candidate Rasco, the Village Council recently voted to set engineering targets. They set out a fairly ambitious standard to remove floodwater very quickly with pressurized lines, pumps, and other big changes. Do you agree with the council's targets that were set?
Yes, I agree. We must increase our shoreline protection. We must mitigate flooding, improve our stormwater system, and bury the utility lines. These projects, we should take them on without overburdening our taxpayers financially. We will go after state and federal funding to help with these projects. We have passed a $100 million bond, which we must use and utilize judiciously. And in addition to that, we continue to secure funding for beach renourishment.
My follow-up would be, if it turns out that the cost of meeting these engineering goals, moving a certain amount of flood water in a certain amount of time, a certain rainfall amount, if it turns out to be too expensive, would you be prepared to trim those goals and do something less ambitious?
We're going through that study now, okay? So that will give us the information that we need to make those decisions. So if we have to fall back because the costs are totally out of kilter, then yes, that would be the answer. But I think that this is premature. We have an ongoing effort to determine what those costs are, and that's part of the K-8 basin, which you're familiar with.
Thank you. Now, Jessica De Leon will ask a question of candidate Petrus.
If the storm water master plan shows that the best way to keep some roads and homes safe and dry is to turn them into one-way roads, would you support that?
Yes, I would support it with the appropriate study. They're looking at all kinds of things. And you mentioned raising roads, but there are other things that we need to look at first, which are the swales and how wide our swales are, as well as the fact that our stormwater drainage system was really built in the 50s and is quite antiquated. So the benefit of what the Village Council decided right now was to put a pilot program out there at the K through 8 and go back towards the bay. We don't even know for sure if pumps are the answer either, because we have to be very careful about the water that we're pumping down into the bay, and we have to have the right filtration. So there is a balance that has to happen here, and it may require one-way roads to get the swale that we need to have passive drainage so that we don't raise the roads too high that would flood our low-lying homes, which still are about probably 50% of the island. We need to care for the community as a whole. And the other thing I'd like to add is that the stormwater that was set, or the level of service that was set, is to have all water off our roads in 24 hours after a storm that would be considered a 10-year event. And that may be too expensive, but that's why they're looking at it now. And that is where the council has to make decisions when it comes back, when these contractors come back with decisions and costs, and then we can apply that throughout the village appropriately.
And a follow-up?
I don't have a follow-up.
Well, our next subject is one that touches every other issue we're going to talk about tonight, and it is something that every future mayor is going to have to deal with, and one that has quickly taken center stage here on Key Biscayne, and that is the topic of character and ethics. I believe Alex Harris has a question from a resident that she's going to read. All of the candidates will answer.
So this is for all of you. What will you do to bring Key Biscayne back to Key Biscayne and heal the wounds if you are elected mayor of our island paradise?
Candidate Gomez.
So, let me just say, we are one community. We're one island. There's no us and them. We're one. I think everybody has to sort of take a deep breath, lower the temperature in this election, and actually not demonize our neighbors. And what we're seeing right now is demonization of our neighbors on all sides, frankly. I don't think we should call our neighbors who disagree with us cave citizens against virtually everything. That's demonizing them. Just like I don't think that chats are helpful. I don't participate in any chat. Okay? We are, if I am mayor, I guarantee this is going to be a very civil, ethical, transparent government where nobody will demonize their neighbors. That's really what we expect as Key Biscayneers. That's what you expect as a population of 15,000. Listen, Joe and Katie right now are simply my political opponents, but they're my neighbors and they're my friends. They will continue to be my neighbors and friends after this election is over. So that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is demonization of people in this community for having different ideas or having different thoughts. That has to stop. I pledge to you as your mayor, that will stop.
Candidate Rasko?
Healing the wounds is an important function after every election. I've been involved in 3 different elections, and we've been able over the years to do that. It is important that everyone realize that we are just volunteers here. We are people just like you, neighbors, that are looking only for the best for Key Biscayne, for improving our quality of life. And to do that, you have to have dialogue. And dialogue is something that's very important. One of my character traits is that I'm a listener. And listening is so important when we talk with each other. But it's really more important to listen to the other person before you talk. And that's something that I always do. We can and we will heal the wounds afterwards. I've done it before because I have the character traits such as a consensus builder, someone who can collaborate with other people. I work with teams. There's no I in team. We have to work together to solve the issues that are before us. And I'm sure that we will, as we have in Key Biscayne before.
Candidate Petrus?
I actually object a little to the form of the question because I really don't think we need to consider ourselves as a divided island. And I think we're giving a little bit too much credence to a minority on either side. And we need to do a better job of tuning that out and staying focused on the intent of the whole community. When I was running for council, I ran on one island, one community. And I thought about doing it again, and I really believe that. And I think it starts with trust. And hopefully the residents through this process will elect someone that they trust, and that trust will expand to the other people on council. And then the decisions that get made everybody may not agree, but if they trust that you went through the process and you're open about how you made your decisions and you study the issues intently, then I think it calms down the whole idea that there's mistrust. So it's something that I believe firmly in. I don't need to overstate it, but it just doesn't need to be part of the dialogue in any campaign.
Thank you. Now, Tony Winton will have a question for candidate Gomez.
Mr. Gomez, much has been made of several ethics investigations, including one in which you resigned just before the county was about to ban you from doing work. Why shouldn't voters be concerned about your methods?
So here we go again, Tony. So I've answered the question to you on your radio show, and I'll answer it again. Number 1, I am the most transparent person in the world. If you go to my website, faustoformayor.com, from the very beginning, I laid out all the issues there, and they're right there. Now, let's talk about this. I've had 2 ethics complaints that were not sustained. Not sustained, okay? I've never been admonished. I've never been disciplined. I've never paid a fine. Compare that to our current council members who have had complaints filed against them, who have been found guilty, and who have had to pay fines. Now, I'll tell you this. They're honorable people. They serve us well. I'm not criticizing them. But I really don't understand the focus of your question that you continue from first radio show and now here on to harp on this issue when it's already been responded to. I'll finally tell you this. Ethics complaints are part of talking trash is part of politics. We've seen it in this campaign where Joe has gotten negative mailers, I've gotten negative mailers as well, okay? And when you're at a certain level in politics, that is a strategy that is being followed. I am proud that I was basically found not guilty of anything. Excuse me, I think.
Thank you, candidate.
I have a
follow-up.
And the follow-up is, I've heard your answer. Why did you resign?
I continued serving Miami-Dade County Expressway Authority, which is a part of Miami-Dade County. So I did not resign from Miami-Dade County. I simply shifted my focus to focus full-time on Miami-Dade Expressway Authority rather than representing the county in MDX. And if you look at the report, Tony, now that you bring it up, okay? Look at the report and look at the opinion of the general counsel of Miami-Dade County, who says MDX is a part of Miami-Dade County. The chairman of MDX is the chairman of the Board of Commissioners of the Board of County Commissioners. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, please continue asking.
Jessica De Leon will have a question for candidate Rasko.
Mr. Rasko, you've been accused of having a role in an attempt to change a sales tax law that, according to your critics, would have undermined local fire departments, like that of Key Biscayne. What is your response to this criticism, and would you have done anything differently?
First of all, everyone knows that I would never work against the interest of our fire department, nor would I work against the interests of this village. This is categorically false. I've been involved from the very beginning of Key Biscayne, starting our fire service in 1993. We have saved hundreds of millions of dollars by having our own fire department. In 1998 to 2002, when I was mayor, I also worked and led the effort to have our firefighters in a new facility. Our fire department now has a great fire station. All these years, I have fought valiantly to help our departments. So that is exactly what's happened.
But would you not have done anything differently? You wouldn't change a single thing, what you did at that time?
I didn't do anything. I did not lobby against this issue, and it was not a priority for the county. So there's really nothing there whatsoever.
And now Alex Harris will have a question for candidate Petros.
Ms. Petros, you worked behind the scenes for months on getting the Key Biscayne library replaced, but some in the community felt excluded, leading to legal action by a condominium. Now there appears to be consensus, but were your actions appropriate at the time?
Yes, my actions were appropriate. The county, for a little bit of history, there is a deed restriction on that land, and it's county land, and it was deeded over by a development company called Fininvest that has long been extinct. And the county was looking at doing something. One of the deed restrictions was specifically about if you were to make substantial changes or look to change the actual building, that you needed to come before a board of 3. And unfortunately, that couldn't happen because the development company was no longer intact. So as a result, in the abundance of caution, independent of me, I had no idea that the county was making a decision to go and look for somebody that could represent that development company to make sure if they were going to invest dollars in our community for a substantial renovation or a new building, that somebody wouldn't come and say that they were violating this deed. They wanted to do it in the abundance of caution, and it wasn't something that I had anything to do with.
Do you believe that there should be greater community involvement in decisions such as that, replacing key buildings?
I think there's been tremendous community involvement in replacing that library, and I think it's a tremendous success for our community. And the fact that we have the people in Key Colony that are, by and large, supporting it at this point and been very involved in the process. I also want to give a hats off to the county, who has worked with us and listened to our community and made changes to that building specifically on concerns, and actually would go to Key Colony first to have a conversation with them as opposed to our whole community. So I think that the county was very diligent, and I think there has been great public input on that process.
Thank you. We will now move to the critical issue of budget and taxes. Tony Winton has a question from a resident that all of the candidates will be able to answer.
Yes, this question from a resident. What is at the top of your to-do list for the first 100 days in office as mayor?
Candidate Fausto.
Protect our village from the external threats that we're facing. Protect our village from the city of Miami, who wants to put a homeless encampment on Virginia Key. The issue is not over. They just simply said, we'll address it 6 months from now. Protect our village from the privatization of the Rickenbacker Causeway. Make sure that our sustainability and resiliency projects are well done, funded, and that we can do them within the budget parameters that are established. In addition to that, work with my colleagues here, and I want to do something different. I want to establish a mayor's council so that we bring the talent of the former mayors to assist the current mayor, and hopefully it'll be me, as to how we manage the village. The other thing, I will ensure respect for citizens. Respect for citizens. Right now, the mayor's office at Village Hall is a museum. The mayor's office has no hours. The council has no hours. Basically, you call Village Hall, many times your call is not responded to, and you don't get a call back. I'm going to change that. I'm going to be sitting at Village Hall one day a week, basically for any citizen of Key Biscayne to come in, talk to me on any issue, we'll try to take care of their problems. We're talking about a significant amount of dollar in infrastructure that we're facing, but we're not taking care of our current infrastructure. I'll do that through something I call the street-by-street program.
Thank you, candidate. And Mayor Davey, you don't get a rebuttal, so you'll have to do that afterwards. I'm sorry. I promised I wasn't going to joke around tonight. I apologize. Candidate Rasko?
Yes. In that very short period of time, I would focus on what's most important, and that is protecting our causeway. So I would absolutely set up meetings with Mayor Cava and Commissioner Regalado, who have been very helpful to us, and we need to nurture that relationship. And I would set the meeting up so that we can be very precise about what's important to us and to hopefully have a timeline as to when the PD&E study, for example, of the Bearcut Bridge is going to start. The other thing that is critical is, and we agree, is the protection of our driveway, which is the causeway, the protection of our bridge, which is the Bearcut Bridge, and the protection from the city of Miami, who has not been a good neighbor to us and has foisted a number of things on top of us, which we will talk about a little bit later. But these are the things that I would take on right away.
Thank you. Candidate Petrus?
We will have recently passed our budget. So the first and foremost thing I would do is study the budget extensively and understand the decisions that were made by the mayor and the council before me. Secondly, I would meet with our manager and the directors to determine what their goals are and why they established them and how they set the budget, and to determine what they plan to do for the next 3 months. Third, I would request and have meetings also with the mayor of Miami-Dade County and the mayor of the city of Miami, as well as any commissioner that would take a meeting with me. And I think one of the critical things here is that we need to turn the page on on our relationship with the city of Miami. And I think that if we could have a discussion about their vested interest in Virginia Key and the Rickenbacker and ours, and if we could come to a conclusion of how to present that to our commissioner, we may start getting some traction in a different way. And those would be my main things.
And now Jessica De Leon has a question for candidate Gomez.
Mr. Gomez, if you don't support raising the debt cap in this election, how do you plan to fund the village's sea level rise and resiliency needs?
First of all is please announce my position correctly. What I said publicly, and I'll say it again tonight, is I believe raising the debt cap now is premature. Not that I oppose raising the debt cap, it is premature. Why is it
expand upon that, please?
Excuse me. Why is it premature? Very simply, we have no projects. We have no costs estimate. Okay? As a matter of fact, if you're looking at the K8 project, it's probably 8 to 9 years old. Frankly, from Tallahassee, we got some of the money to do it already. Now, the village council just approved at the last meeting a consultant to sort of price out the cost of the 8 zones. Okay? Why do I believe it's premature? We can't approve a $100 million bond issue, which I voted for. Okay? and then say we're going to raise the debt cap. Now, frankly, 1%. Is 1% enough? Do we need less? Do we need more? I think the citizens deserve respect. And I think that respect is, listen, these are the projects we're going to do. This is how much they're going to cost. So now let's all of us working together figure out how we're going to pay for it. And in addition to that, we need to bring the federal and the state and local dollars to help us out. We're part of a larger ecosystem. Key Biscayne cannot take care of its problems on its own. So I think it is premature to raise the debt cap at this moment because there are no projects.
Thank you, candidate.
We don't know how much it's going to cost.
Thank you, candidate. Alex Harris will have a question for candidate Rasko.
Property values are soaring in Key Biscayne, but so is inflation. Key Biscayne is one of a handful of towns that has not announced an intention to soften tax increases. In fact, out of 34 municipalities in Miami-Dade, Key Biscayne is one of only 4 where the tax increase exceeds the rate of inflation. Some say this is okay because even with the increase, Key Biscayne has many deferred projects and would still have one of the lowest property tax rates. Others say the budget needs to be cut to lower rates. What is your view? And if you propose cuts, please be specific about how your cuts would reduce the rate.
Let me say this categorically. I would not raise the millage rate, nor would I cut essential services. I do agree that property values are through the roof. We should not overly tax our residents. Specifically, if you absolutely have to cut something from the budget, we have talked about the approximate $1 million that will go for the expansion of the community center, and that can be deferred. We also have a very healthy working capital reserve of $10 million. So I think that the council will have options, and they should consider lowering the tax rate, the millage. And if I'm sitting there, I would absolutely advocate for that.
Outside of deferring the expansion of the community or the redevelopment of the community center, what other specific policies would you say would be okay to cut?
Well, as I said, there's also the revenue side. So there's the working capital reserve of $10 million. There's a $4 million reserve also for emergency services. We can and should look at all these options and bring the millage rate down. That's what needs to happen. I think that we overshot, that we put it up a little too high, and it's going to be difficult to explain to everyone, but this is the process that we follow, and therefore, cutting the millage rate at the end of this process is what needs to happen.
Thank you. Now, Tony Winton will have a question for candidate Petros.
Candidate Petros, this is a follow-up on the same issue of millage. Is it a false premise to concern yourself about millage rate when, for many homeowners, the actual maximum tax increase is only 3% because of the cap in the Save Our Homes constitutional amendment?
I do not think it's a false premise, and I recognize what you're saying, which is sometimes even when property values are going down, there's plenty of us here that have the homestead exemption that will get a 3% increase. But I think that when you're looking at your budget, you need a ceiling and you need something to keep things in check and to work towards, and that's what our millage rate is. One of the things that hasn't been brought up is the council set a trim rate. They haven't set the millage rate yet. And last year, the trim rate was set at 3.367, and they reduced it to 3.199. This year, they've put the trim at 3.288. One of the things that I would suggest to residents, if they really are wedded to trying to keep this millage rate the same year over year, which it was for a while, get involved early and make that known to your council, and do it in February. Do it in March, because the first budget that comes out is set by the manager. And then the council has to work from there. So it hasn't been set yet.
Let me apologize to you, candidate Petros. We reversed your time. You have 30 more seconds on this, and then 60 for the follow-up. That's on me, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize.
Well, you made me stop. The point of the matter is, and when I look at this budget, and Mr. Roscoe here mentioned the community center. I agree with that. I also looked, if you look at an overview of how are our cost increases, you look at the percentage increase. I noticed that our fire department's asking for an 8% increase and our police is a 4%. So that's where your mayor and your council needs to dig a little deeper and look at these issues and determine where the cuts can be made to try to get the most efficient budget for the community, given particularly that we're going to have big projects that may have a separate item on that millage rate called debt service.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yeah. In a previous debate, you also identified the community center as a possible area for a reduction. What else would fall under the Katie Petros Budget Acts? And would you think about reopening the budget because the council can amend the budget for the previous council did?
What was the last part of that? I didn't understand that.
Would you think about amending the budget? It's been done before, that the previous council that's going to vote in September, would you think about doing that?
I would think about it, but I would lean against it because, again, I think that I wasn't personally involved in the minutia of that particular budget. And unless something grossly stands out to me, I wouldn't change it. Now, a budget is exactly that. It's a budget. We can spend very differently than the budget. You just can't go above that. And you only have certain dollars based on the property taxes coming in. So a lot of times, our community actually spends less than they've budgeted for and brought in. And then we're able to use that for projects, for capital improvement projects. In fact, right now in the budget, there is $3.2 million in a grant that came from the federal government to be used towards specifically for capital projects. And it's coming over 2 years. So there's a lot of opportunity to do things differently.
Thank you. We've reached the midway point. I want to commend all of the candidates on your demeanor and being very, very informative. Thank you to the panel. We're going to move on. Yeah, if you'd like to applaud, now would be a good time to applaud to your candidates. I think they're doing a great job. But I will ask you to hold your applause until the end after this. We're on the home stretch. It'll be fine. We're going to move to a contentious issue. And these issues have been in the headlines recently and are likely to stay there. We're moving on to the Causeway and Virginia Key. Jessica De Leon has a resident question that all of the candidates can answer.
From a local resident, if elected, what specific measures would you take to protect cyclists riding through Crandon Boulevard in Key Biscayne?
Candidate Gomez.
Cyclist riding through. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to take a look at the Rickenbacker Causeway globally and not that specific question. Okay? Rickenbacker Causeway is operated and owned by Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County does not know how to operate it, does not want to own it. The last 3 mayors of Miami-Dade County have tried to get rid of the Rickenbacker Causeway. Okay. My specific, concrete, and concise answer is the Rickenbacker Causeway should be operated by the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority, which is the county's transportation authority. They have dollars, all the toll revenues from all expressways, plus they have bonding authority. So they have the dollars, they can bond the toll revenue, all countywide, to help us take care of issues like the Bearcut Bridge and other improvements. Now, if you're talking about cyclists and specifically, I think there has to be great separation. And you also need to talk about the different type of cyclists that are on the Bearcut Bridge. You have the cyclists, my wife and I, who get on a bicycle on a Sunday and we sort of, puff along. And then you have the Pelotons. My wife and I are going to ride in a bicycle lane, which is state law today. You must ride in a bicycle lane today. The Pelotons will not. And the Pelotons have made it clear that they will not if you have grade separation, they will not ride within the boundaries of the grade separation. So it is an enforcement issue. The key thing of the Rickenbacker is it is
Thank you, candidate.
It is multi.
Follow up?
Everybody has to be safe.
You say it's enforcement, so what specific measures in that regard would you take?
Well, not that I take, basically our police departments take. State law says that if you have a bicycle lane, you must ride in that bicycle lane if you're riding a bicycle at less than the speed of traffic at the time and place indicated. Now, according to the folks that ride at the Tour de France, the highest rate that they go is 28 miles an hour. Okay? Now, obviously, none of the people who are in the pelotons is a Tour de France, so they're riding less. So they're riding at less than the speed of traffic. Under current state law, they must ride in a bicycle lane. Question is, obviously, our enforcement comes to the edge of the village of Key Biscayne. Then you have the city of Miami, and then you have Miami-Dade County, who have to enforce it. And frankly, up to now, they haven't enforced it very well. That is state law. State law needs to be followed.
Thank you. Candidate Rasko?
Yes, the issue within the village is not as complex as it is outside of the village. But their same principles apply. We need to have some separation. Going back to the causeway, I don't think the causeway should be handed over to private hands or to MDX. However, I do believe that we need a proper seat at the table. And by working with Miami-Dade County, we can achieve that. And by having that proper seat at the table will allow us to look at all the issues and look at the concepts that are beginning to emerge, especially from the village, on how to make that separation happen. We also need to make very clear to the county that those toll dollars belong to that causeway and shouldn't be rated, and they should not be taken elsewhere. And so that's also part of the conversation. I also oppose Plan Z for the same reasons. I don't think it should be given over to private hands. Key Biscayne needs to decide its own fate, and collaborating with Miami-Dade County is a very good start to have that seat at the table.
Okay, but you say separation is the answer. How specifically would you propose doing the separation between drivers and cyclists inside the village?
Inside the village, I've been in Washington, D.C. and other cities, and there are small, separate buttons and things that can be used to separate. I've seen it work in this city, specifically in Washington, D.C. It's something that could be easily done to make that separation happen.
Candidate Petrus?
Just to be clear, when you first asked the question, it's about the cyclists on the causeway or within Key Biscayne?
Within the village.
Within the village. Okay, so within the village, when I was on council, we actually looked at and had some state funding to create a green lane that's consistent with the rest of that causeway. And it was voted down. And our bike lanes right now are not even well delineated. And I do think as a community, we need to, number one, repaint our bike lanes. And number two, remind people of when they should be using the bike lanes as opposed to when they should be on sidewalks. We also have issues with electric scooters right now. And our police force has done a good job of working with workshops with students and, children of all ages and their parents to try to educate them on how to safely use scooters in our village. The vote we don't know yet whether it's working or not, but we now have cyclists, we have scooters, we have pedestrians. And I think in addition, when we look to restructure our roads, that this might be something where we create a wider lane for these different people and these different types of transportation because we want to get people out of their cars. So I think it's important to promote it, but promote it safely.
So do you think an education program is key to?
I think it's a start.
cyclists?
I think it's a start, and I think enforcement is also a really important part of this. We have been somewhat spotty at times with enforcement, but I truly believe we shouldn't start with banning anything. And we have to start with an attempt to get everybody to follow the rules, but we also need the enforcement in place. So as your mayor, I would very much have a strong emphasis on enforcement of many things, not just our traffic laws in our community.
Thank you. Alex Harris now has a question for candidate Gomez.
Miami-Dade Commissioner Raquel Regalado said she was ready to file litigation to revert the deed that put Virginia Key under the control of the city of Miami. Do you think that's a good idea? Can the city of Miami be trusted to be a steward of Virginia Key?
Well, I think we need to take the politics out of politics. So Commissioner Regalado said that she is willing to try to get her colleagues to file a lawsuit against the city of Miami to exercise the reverter deed for the property that was owned by the county, was given to the city of Miami if they put a homeless center there. So I'm just reminded of Commissioner Regalado's father, Mayor Tomas Regalado, when the county attempted to do that previously, and his response was, we're going to file suit against the county and take back the port of Miami, because that is city of Miami land. I don't think the county nor the city of Miami want to get into that brouhaha of who owns what. Okay? So let's, that's a very good line. It's a political line. Let's talk about what's necessary. Okay? What's necessary is we need to look forward. We can't afford to say we were blindsided. We can't afford to say we didn't know what was happening. Commissioner Carollo in September of last year publicly stated he was going to put a homeless encampment on Virginia Key. Nobody paid attention. Okay? Nobody listened to him. But the fact of life is he said it. It came now a couple of weeks ago. Suddenly it passed on a 3-2 vote. So the question is, how do we protect Key Biscayne so that does not happen to us again? Number one is, obviously we have to deal with the city of Miami. Number two, and more importantly, we need to give the Rickenbacker Causeway to the Miami-Dade Expressway Authority.
Time.
Why? Concurrency.
Thank you, candidate.
You said deal with Miami. Do you mean improve relationships with the city, or what do you mean by deal with Miami?
Well, may I respond?
Follow up. You have 60 seconds.
Very, very simple. After this happened, I took a group of citizens, leading citizens of Key Biscayne, to meet with City of Miami commissioners. And we did, privately, not announced, and basically trying to find where the win-win solution was. We knew after those meetings, and we had a series of meetings with commissioners, leading citizens of here, what was going to be the game plan of the City of Miami. We did that quietly. That is how you basically affect public policy. Quietly, effectively, not making noise, and having the contacts to pick up your cell phone and call them and get an appointment immediately. That's what I bring, and that's what I offer. And one other final thing. You need to look at the fact that Commissioner Russell is going to be out of office in November. Now, who's going to replace him? Is it going to be a special election, or are the people who voted for a homeless encampment going to vote to put a new commissioner there? Those are the sort of things we need to look at. We can't say, we're blindsided, we didn't know. We need to be on top of things, and we need to be proactive, and we need to know what.
Thank you,
our
candidate.
strategy is.
Tony Winton will now have a question for candidate Rasko.
Many candidates, I think all of you, have said that you're opposed to privatization of the Rickenbacker Causeway, but where else would the money come from? In the past, it's been suggested that Key Biscayne might get more of a role if it bought its way in with a large capital investment. This has been done on a smaller scale at Mast Academy and the school board. Would you support a large capital investment in the causeway, such as a bond, if it meant the island got what it wanted from the project?
Based on your scenario, my answer would be yes. If we want to collaborate, we have to step up. And that's the reason why it's important that we make these types of prudent investments that will help increase our quality of life. And if this is a possibility, we need to study it, we need to look at it. I don't see an issue there.
What would be the effect on tolls, though? There doesn't seem to be any solution that doesn't involve going much higher than $24 a year, which is the current rate.
We need to study the toll situation, because obviously, if you make the tolls too large, you will probably lose revenue. So it's important that be part of the solution, that we look at what the toll level should be. Will we have to probably pay something more? Probably. Let's be realistic. That's needed to keep that road, our driveway into Key Biscayne, we need it to be unobstructed. And those are the kind of things that the village is already working on, is to accommodate stakeholders along the way so that we don't have traffic signal turns that we have to make. By putting 2 lanes in the middle of that median, we can look for a solution that allows us to come in and out with a throughput.
Now, Jessica De Leon has a question for candidate Petros.
Plan Z, a controversial plan to privatize the causeway, is back. The city of Miami recently formally endorsed it, but if you mention the word Plan Z in Key Biscayne, some people recoil. On the other hand, Council Member Ed London suggested public forums with architect because he felt it was the plan most likely to win out in the end. Would you do the same If so, why? And if not, why not?
The first thing I would start with is education of the community of what the Z plan actually is. It doesn't reduce any lanes, and it separates cyclists. I think what our community was most upset about was the concept of the privatization, as well as the fact that there was a cone of silence and it came out of nowhere with a surprise. There may be a solution that looks very similar to Plan Z, and I think we need to recognize what the city of Miami and Dade County, what that area represents to them. They have many more residents that's their only beach. And they want them to have access to that beach as much as we want to have the freedom to go to and from our homes. So once we start to analyze what it means to them, and we recognize that, and then we ask them to understand what it means to us, then I think we can have a more open dialogue. And I think that would help us determine, again, let's go back to trust. If you trust that your elected officials are looking at everything and protecting your interest, you can have those conversations and we don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction.
Do you think that education can occur in such a public forum format?
Absolutely.
That's the shortest answer of the night. Congratulations. If I could give you an extra point, I would. We touched on this in the last topic, but we'd like to have the candidates speak more specifically about the topic of Key Biscayne's image and working with other municipalities. To start this topic, Alex Harris has a resident question that all of the candidates will be able to answer.
So this was an email from a resident. They said, many council meetings become interminably long with some council members grandstanding, going off on tangents, fighting with each other, and in general disincentivizing residents to listen to the meetings. How will you manage the council meetings to make them more efficient and more civil?
Candidate Gomez, yes.
Yeah. That's actually a very good question. We have a leadership void in Key Biscayne today. Frankly, the meetings are not handled correctly. Robert's Rules of Orders are not followed. Council members speak interminably long, and I remember one specific example of a resident who had her 3 minutes and had to wait 5 hours from 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night before her issue was addressed. And then it was frankly addressed almost jokingly. There has to be respect to our residents. And today there's a significant lack of respect from our village government to the population of Key Biscayne. That needs to happen. Meetings have to be shorter. I mean, the discussions, frankly, you sit there. Let's go back to Plan Z for a second. When we started the Plan Z issue, and I went and spoke in front of council for 3 minutes, and that I think Plan Z is an existential threat to Key Biscayne, and I raised that flag initially. Okay? Council cut me off for 3 minutes. It's the right thing to do. Then they spent over an hour discussing what they were going to name a park. Where are the priorities? Frankly, there are no priorities. We have a leadership void today. We will address that leadership void, all of us working together.
Candidate Roscoe?
As to the question of council meetings being too long and having a disparate conversations there, I'm the only one up here who's had the experience of running meetings here on Key Biscayne. And as always, there are going to be conflicts, but with respect and by listening to each other, we can achieve exactly that and make the meetings more efficient. When people look at me and they see how I run meetings, they know that I'm going to be fair with them. I'm going to let them say their piece and talk about what's important. And that input is something that has worked for me. In the community center, for example, when I was mayor in 1998, that allowed that exact footprint is what I used. I used the ability to bring consensus to people. I was a listener. I allowed people to provide their input. But at the same time, I had a steady hand at the tiller there, trying to get to where we eventually got. It was the building a community center. As to going back to Virginia Key, I would like to say that Commissioner Regalado has our back on Virginia Key, and she has drawn a line in the sand, and I think it's important that we support her.
Candidate Petrus.
I think the first thing that people need to understand and remind themselves of is the structure of our government. The mayor is 1 vote out of 7. They do run the meeting, but they also have to show equal respect to all the council members. And I think if you set that tone, it helps minimize different conversations going in different directions. Also, the manager sets the agenda, and that may not be in the order of interest of the public community. So one of the things that happens many times is those agenda items get moved around. And that would be something I would use as much as possible to try to make sure that we moved the items that are of most interest to our community to the front so people wouldn't have to stay there for that long. There are rules of order that have to be followed, and that unfortunately by nature sometimes makes things go long. But I also think it's important not to put too many items on an agenda so that we can cover the items of concern appropriately. And if we need to do additional meetings to cut the agenda, we will do that. Obviously with the agreement of everyone on council. It's a check and balance.
Thank you. Now, Tony Winton will have a question for candidate Gomez.
Earlier this year, candidate Gomez, there were big meetings over on happiness with the K-8 Center.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Earlier this year, there were big meetings, well-attended meetings over unhappiness with the K-8 Center, the island's main public school. A new principal is coming in. There have been calls for a charter school. Would you support a charter school on Key Biscayne or a similar situation like the village has with Mast, but for an elementary school?
Listen, what I support is having the best K-8 school available, okay? I believe in public education, bottom line. I think public education is the bedrock of our democracy, where everybody has an equal opportunity to be educated and then contribute to our welfare. I believe in public education. That doesn't mean I'm against charter, but this is our only school. That school is the heart of this community. That school is why parents move here. That school is why our property values are up. Okay? Now, the question is, we obviously had turbulence in that school for the last couple of years, or the last year, with the principal we had. That individual has been moved out. I understand a new principal is here, and I understand she has been reaching out to the mothers, and I think that things are going well. I spoke recently to the head of the PTA about it. If I was mayor, what would I do? What I would do is basically the village of Key Biscayne should be more active, not reactive to that K-8 school. And how do we be more active? We have biannual meetings with the superintendent. We have biannual meetings with our principal. We have biannual meetings with our school board member to discuss how the village of Key Biscayne can collaborate closely with that K-8 school. And we put not only meetings, but an agenda and follow-up items. How are we going to follow up? What's necessary? Can the village of Key Biscayne contribute? Or basically, is it a responsibility of the school board to improve the school in certain areas? I fully am in favor of Key Biscayne having a
Thank
public
you, candidate.
school.
Now for a follow-up.
The follow-up is, just to clarify your answer, you would be opposed to the village supporting a charter school in the manner of, say, Pembroke Pines or other communities where the village government itself actually operates the charter school.
Okay. So as you're wont to do, Tony, you want to put words in my mouth, let me answer my way. Okay? Very simply this. I am in favor of a public K-8 school. Okay? I am in favor of a public K-8 school. I am in favor of us having collaborative meetings with the leadership of Dade County Public Schools to assure ourselves that this will be the best K-8 in the system.
Thank you, candidate. Now, please hold your applause. Thank you. Now, Jessica De Leon will have a question for candidate Rasco.
Key Biscayne residents woke up last week to hear of a plan to place the homeless on Virginia Key. It's one of several ideas for this island that have rankled residents. Mr. Rasco, you are the chair of the Virginia Key Advisory Board. You said the board was blindsided. Why is that? And as mayor, what would you do about it?
There are many examples of issues that have not come properly before the Virginia Key Advisory Board as required by the ordinance that created this board. The City of Miami has never been a good partner to Key Biscayne. They are constantly giving the village of Key Biscayne a raw deal. They are constantly putting things all the way back to 1992, when they have left the Marine Stadium to crumble. When they brought Ultra to us, remember the image of the kids going down the bridge, walking home on the Rickenbacker. Then we had the boat show. And then the latest installment has been the homeless encampment back, which I strongly opposed. Time and time again, the City of Miami has not been a good steward of this park of Virginia Key. And I believe that working together in this community, we will continue to fight to protect our interests.
Follow up?
How would you work to improve that relationship so we are not blindsided again?
Okay? The important thing is to try to collaborate. If they don't collaborate, then you need to protect the interests of Key Biscayne first. What could happen, and this is something that as chair of the advisory board, I started to work a while back, was there is opportunities to collaborate between the City of Miami and the village of Key Biscayne, especially in the area of sports fields. This is a dire necessity that we have on Key Biscayne, an issue that I've been following for a long time and I've been very involved in. So there could be ways to collaborate by the very land that is being offered as a homeless encampment could become a park, and a park where we provide these fields, these sports fields, and the city then has the ability to use them.
Thank you, candidate. And now
the
Alex Harris will ask a question of candidate Petrus.
Continuing off of that, tonight we've discussed a lot of high-profile conflicts between Key Biscayne and the City of Miami, the county. What would you do to repair or shift relationships with those municipalities, and how do you think they need to be shifted?
I think we need to do our best to work with the city and the county to come up with something that's a win. And I also think we need to pay better attention to the meetings that are happening at the City of Miami and the county level, even when we don't think anything's going on that is of interest to our community. I think we need to think of ourselves as part of a larger entity. And one of the things that made our community so successful is that we did fight for incorporation and we isolated ourselves and we got tremendous service and benefit from that fact. But that's not where we are today. Today we need to work with people across the bridge and we need to understand what Virginia Key and what the Rickenbacker Causeway means to Dade County residents and City of Miami residents. We get to look at the water every day when we come to and from our homes. Many of those residents go once a week, and that is their beach. That's the beach we take our dogs to sometimes because it's the only one they can go off leash. There's just a different perspective, and I think we as a community need to know that. And if we start verbalizing that, we may be able to break down some of these barriers that have been up for a long time.
If elected, what would your priority issue to work with the City of Miami be? Would it be the homeless camp? Would it be the causeway? What would be the first thing you'd want to tackle with the city?
The first thing would be the causeway, as well as the programming and planning that's happening on Virginia Key. The causeway is obviously the county, but the city has a vested interest as well. And in addition, the possibility of playing fields has been bantered about for about 6 years now, which is actually not where the homeless camp was being considered. So that area is this funny little spot that we went to visit in between the bike paths and the actual outing club, which may or may not be part of the deed restriction. These are the things that we need to understand better so that when we have our arguments, we have it backed in knowledge and we can have a discussion that makes sense.
Thank you. We have now reached our final topic of this debate, and that is public safety. Tony Winton will read a question from one of our residents that all of the candidates will have the opportunity to answer.
Actually, we didn't get a resident question for this topic. We moved it to the other section, so about that, but we can certainly pivot and do one of the other questions.
Sure. Then Jessica De Leon, you're out, Tony. Jessica De Leon has a question for candidate Gomez.
Key Biscayne frequently ranks as one of the safest communities in the state. Just this year, it ranked as number 18 in a ranking of 143 cities by SafeWise, a home security firm. The village has authorized expansion of the police department, and new cameras are going up. Still, an armed robbery last year rattled residents. Does Key Biscayne need to make major changes in policing?
Listen, we have a wonderful police department. We have a wonderful fire rescue service. Okay? Those two are the jewels of our government. Now, let's talk about police, and then I want to talk about fire. Police, we have 38 sworn officers. I understand the chief is looking for 2 more sworn officers in the budget. That would take it up to 40. I agree with Ed London. We need community policing. Okay? Our police department is great, but the presence in our neighborhoods, even though we're a very safe community, we're the second safest community in the state of Florida, the presence in our neighborhood is lacking. Visibility is lacking. Okay? So what is my solution? My solution is a very cost-effective solution. Auxiliary police officers. These are individuals who carry a gun under the badge. They're certified by the state of Florida, and for some reason they're no longer officers. They've gone to another line of work, or they're retired and they want to keep their certification. They need to volunteer with the department. Boca Raton does it, Coral Gables does it, Clearwater does it. We can have auxiliary police officers at zero cost to us, salary-wise, in golf carts, traversing our neighborhoods so that we have more police visibility. Now, Ed London suggested, for ad infinitum, he's been suggesting community policing. I agree with Ed London. Okay, I'm not a police officer. I'm not somebody who is adept at putting standards for policing, and I think the chief does it. But visibility
Thank you,
is key.
candidate. Follow-up?
So you're proposing essentially a reserve program. Is that who you would suggest do this community policing, or would you propose community policing amongst all officers in the department?
Well, listen, it's not really a reserve program. It's called Auxiliary Police Officer Program. And other departments have them. What I'm saying is visibility is key. We're a very safe community, extremely safe community, but there's a lack of visibility. So I would keep the force that we currently have, perhaps sort of deploy them differently so they patrol in sectors and supplement that with auxiliary police officers. For example, our police officers really don't handle traffic very much. We could have perhaps our auxiliary police officers handle traffic situations, okay? Or, so it really is a question of deployment. It really is a question of how do we save money? Or our chief wants 2 additional officers when there's a pool of certified officers licensed and approved by the state of Florida that can come and volunteer for us.
Thank you. Now Alex Harris will have a question for candidate Rasko.
The use of scooters and e-bikes has proliferated in the village and has led to some accidents already. Should Key Biscayne regulate scooters or ban them altogether?
I think the police chief is doing a good job of trying to make this work. I'm not ready yet to ban them, but if the problems persist and we are not able to educate parents and the children, then that could be an option that I would use. I think it's important that we give the chief, who's been here less than a year, a chance to do that. But I have to tell you that we all need to work on this, because the chief told me when I met with him that he had a workshop to try to talk to parents about this issue, and no parents showed up. That's unacceptable. We need to change that.
How would you balance the concerns of making sure the streets are safe and there are no accidents with these e-bikes and scooters with the desire to have more people in a walkable community, more people out of their cars, that sort of vibe in this community?
Key Biscayne lends itself very much to that pedestrian walkways so that people can get out of their cars and take a walk. I'd like to go back because it's about Key Biscayne being the safest or one of the safest cities in Florida. This is part of what makes the village the greatest place in the world to live. As mayor, I will always have the backs of our police and fire personnel and not cut these essential services. That means not defunding the police or the fire service. I've met with both the police chiefs and the fire chief. These are professionals, and I will trust their judgment as far as personnel goes. I believe that the auxiliary thing isn't something that's possible based on my conversation with the police chief, but you may be right.
Time.
Thank you, candidate. Now, Tony Winton will have a question for candidate Petros.
Thank you. Collective bargaining with police and fire unions will be part of the council's policy agenda in the coming year. The previous round of bargaining was acrimonious and only ended when manager Andrea Aga left, as well as you, Ms. Petros, and a new council took over. With inflation at more than 10%, unions very well may be asking for makeup raises. One council member said that officers in Key Biscayne should be grateful they get to work here. What is your approach to collective bargaining with Key Biscayne's police and fire unions?
My first approach is to study our community, study the benefits we have, and study the salaries and everything else. The second part of this, which I did on council, was to look at all the surrounding communities and communities that look like us throughout the state of Florida. I spent countless hours studying salaries and pensions. And most people don't realize how important this is and also how difficult it is. Because when you make decisions on pensions, you're making decisions not only for the 2 or the 4 years that you're up there, but for the 30 years that the community has to absorb the policies that are set in that collective bargaining. When I first got on council, I've been involved with 2 collective bargainings. And when I studied the different pensions throughout the community, it became obvious that we were below average. And we worked hard to do 2 things. One was to put in place a pension system that could grow with inflation and grow with the advancement of the employees. So we changed it from a hard dollar cap to a percentage cap. We increased the multiplier. We added benefits that made both our police and fire very happy. Contract negotiations are never easy. And it's really important that your council members represent the community. The firefighters and the police officers, they have union representatives that last much longer than your elected officials. It's a really important decision to have members that understand that fact and that dynamic.
Follow-up?
One thing that happened in the last round of bargaining is that the manager removed the department heads from the bargaining, the fire chief and the police chief, and decided to just go straight ahead without the input at the table with those 2 top managers of those departments. Would you want to do that, repeat that?
I think that's probably the most effective way to do this because, again, the unions have their elected representatives. The management of the police and the fire are not part of the union. So they have to walk in there and negotiate on both sides of this. And they're put in very difficult positions, and it undermines them with their staff as well as with the council members potentially. So again, we have a lawyer that represents us, they have lawyers that represent them, and they have elected representatives in the collective bargaining.
Thank you. We've now moved on to our closing statements. Now might be a good time to give our candidates another round of applause. I think you guys did all very fantastic. Closing statements, candidate Gomez.
First of all, thank you to the residents of Key Biscayne for participating in this debate. And I would also like to recognize my colleagues on stage for joining us this evening. You each have heard us state our positions and our visions. You've also heard that my approach is a bit different, more seasoned and experienced, and that I provide concise and concrete answers to the challenges facing us. Concise and concrete answers. I spend my professional life crafting solutions to difficult problems, those where interests collided and everyone came to the table seeking advantage. That skill set translates to us working together to successfully meet the challenges of today. Key Biscayne is at a watershed moment, my friends. We are, unfortunately, no longer the village that our founders envisioned. We're a mature municipality. We're a mature municipality facing external threats. The latest example being the proposed homeless encampment on Virginia Key. The skill set of yesterday no longer applies to the challenges of today. It's time to turn the page on the personalities and policies of the past. It is time for Key Biscayne to be respected and recognized by Miami-Dade County, the city of Miami, and the state of Florida, and Tallahassee. You and I together can make that happen. The choice for the next leader of Key Biscayne now is in your hands.
Time.
Thank you, Candidate Gomez. Candidate Rasco, closing statements.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our hosts, Crossbridge Church, Key Biscayne Community Foundation, the KB Independent, First Service, and also the Chamber of Commerce. I think it's so important that you're here, that you're part of this process, that you make our democracy better by being informed. And what's important to remember is that this election is about our future, the future of Key Biscayne. And will you have a trusted leader to guide us into that future? I am that trusted leader that you can depend on, and you have depended on me over many years. Today, I humbly ask you for your vote on August 23rd. This is an important election. Please come out and vote. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Candidate Rasco. Candidate Petros, closing statements.
In the brief time I have left, I'd like to share a few key reasons why I am the right choice to serve as your next mayor. As compared to my opponents, I believe I possess the best combination of experience, knowledge, and temperament for the job. While anyone can run for mayor, the experience of having recently served on village council has benefited me greatly. I have great working relationships with all of the current council members, having collaborated with them on today's challenges. I have spent countless hours studying, analyzing, and voting on issues of great importance in our community. Once on the job, I will hit the ground running. Finally, I have the temperament for this job. I'm tenacious when I believe in an issue, and I have the drive to see it through, but I respect everyone I work with, and you, the citizens, most of all. A little dose of humility is an asset. I don't claim to know all the answers, but I can promise that I will listen to you and invest the time and energy to find the solutions. None of these issues we've discussed tonight have easy solutions. The political climate we now live in requires us as public servants to have a thick skin. I'll work hard to improve that climate, but I won't let it distract me. I believe in this community, I care about this community, and I'm prepared to lead it with your input for the next 2 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'd also like a round of applause for our panelists, Tony, Jessica, and Alex. And one last time, I'd like to recognize the crew, Victor on camera, Theo in the back, and of course our timekeeper, Sydney Vigil, who is the most powerful woman in the room. Thank you to our sponsors, the Key Biscayne Community Foundation, First Service Residential, and the Key Biscayne Chamber of Commerce. And finally, thank you, our audience. We really appreciate you being here.